If there was a show in my life that I had to come back to and rewatch, despite having a lot of downs, this show would definitely be one Fairly Odd Parents. The main purpose of this video is because I just want to give my overall opinions on these episodes, and if you don't agree with my opinions, that's totally okay. But yeah, anyways, top 10 worst SpongeBob episodes. I was originally gonna do this video a while back, but yeah, my opinion changed a whole lot now, so yeah, I'm going to be remastering a video that didn't really make it on YouTube because I thought it was stupid. So yeah, and as you can expect, most of these episodes are going to be coming from, well, not even most, all of these episodes are going to be coming from season 6 through 8. So yeah, without a moment to waste, let's go through my top 10 least favorite SpongeBob episodes. Number 10 on the worst list is Waiting. And yeah, like I said, it was originally gonna be all season 6 through 8 episodes, but then I forgot there was a season 5 episode on my top 10 worst, so yeah, but trust me, the rest are from season 6 through 8. This is the only season 5 episode I despise with a passion. Despise to love a Patty, which I'll be talking about in honorable mentions, but yeah, for now on, let's focus on Waiting. Have you ever wanted to see a SpongeBob episode where SpongeBob is a complete prick to everyone, and then the second half of an episode is just SpongeBob and Patrick crying? Well, this episode is going to offer all of that. So basically, SpongeBob eats all these cereal boxes to try to earn this prize, and then he ends up waiting at the mailbox with Patrick. But then they end up starving, so Patrick ends up leaving to get some food. And SpongeBob said despite he's being hungry, he said that he will stay at the mailbox no matter what. And yeah, it doesn't turn out well. He literally flips Sandy after Sandy offers to do karate with him, and he refuses to feed Gary. And he was so focused on his package that he forgot that it was his birthday. Why? What is this episode? And now let's get to the second half, which I kind of hate even more than the first half. So, the toy finally arrives, and then they open the toy, they call it beautiful. Patrick does one touch, and then the toy springs over everywhere, or should I say, broken. So, after the toy broke, SpongeBob and Patrick start bursting into tears, and Squidward tries to ignore, but then their crying starts to get on his nerves and he gets involved. And then he tells them that the toy is supposed to do that. God, I hated SpongeBob so much in this episode. Thankfully, I found more episodes worse than this, surprisingly, but still, that doesn't mean I don't like this episode. This episode sucks. And yeah, definitely my least favorite of season 5. Anyways, let's move on to number 9. Number 9 is Bubble Troubles. Wow, another episode with SpongeBob being unlikable in it? That's 2 episodes in a row, and this is only number 9. So basically, the first half is just complete filler, SpongeBob and Patrick blowing bubbles in each other's eyes, with hot sauce as the bubbles. Why? And then they just keep blowing it into each other's eyes, and it's stupid. Then, after finally somewhat getting to the plot, even though this title is technically a misleading title, they head to Sandy's house, where Sandy's trying to fix her air supply, which literally was never seen in this show before. And so, after SpongeBob blows hot sauce on it, it ends up destroying her air supply. And then Sandy tells them that without her air, she could go mad, which isn't entirely true. We always see her in Bikini Bottom, in her helmet, and she's completely fine. So, is this episode uncanon or what? I don't know, this episode just feels completely fan-made to me. And here's one of the scenes where I solely put this episode on the list. SpongeBob goes to Sandy's submarine and opens the door, despite that he's forgetting that they're underwater. And so when he opens it, all the water gets inside the submarine. SpongeBob, how stupid are you? Even Patrick said he knew that was dumb. And yeah, the rest of this episode is just Sandy suffering. Yeah, I hate this episode a lot, but But still, there are worst ones. So let's just move on to number 8. I don't want to talk about this episode anymore. Number 8 is Pet Sitter Pat. Let's just get this episode over with. So basically, SpongeBob goes to his grandma's house to celebrate her birthday, but he doesn't want to leave Gary alone at the house, even though when he goes to work, Gary is completely fine on his own. But there is an episode related to this topic, which we'll get to soon. So SpongeBob wants Patrick to take care of Gary. And this episode is just Patrick torturing Gary start to finish. He literally threatens to pour salt on Gary, almost drowns Gary, and tries to burn him with a flamethrower. I wouldn't even let my pet near Patrick, even though I don't have a pet. But still, even if I did, I wouldn't even let it close to that pink creature. And then when SpongeBob calls them because he feels worried, Patrick, being as cocky as he is, saying that everything is fine, when clearly everything is not fine, when the house literally almost got flooded because of him. And the gross imagery with Gary is just... Why can't Gary live normal? I mean, he kinda did in the modern seasons, which is... present day SpongeBob, which is ultimately better than the mid-season era. So, yeah, and don't even get me started on the ending of this episode. When SpongeBob gets home, he sees Gary reading a bedtime story to Patrick, making it look like Gary is completely fine. No, you writers can't pull that. Gary was literally being tortured by Patrick start to finish. And then on the ending, you just want to make it look like Gary is fine and Patrick having a happy ending? Why? There was no point of this. Let's just move on to number 7. Number 7 is Boating Buddies. This is one of those episodes that is just terrible from start to finish. Not saying that the other episodes on this list were terrible from start to finish, but this one is definitely one of those episodes I hated from start to finish. So basically, SpongeBob bothered Squidward because he was breathing. What? I'm just confused. Why? Who bothers somebody because they're breathing? What kind of logic? Never mind. And then, apparently, out of nowhere, just for the purpose of this one episode, Squidward has a boatmobile, which was only seen in this episode. After that, Squidward's boatmobile was never seen again. And no, the police did not tow it. They definitely did not tow it. It was never mentioned that it got towed. So then after that, Squidward was trying to drive away from SpongeBob, but then ends up getting a ticket for driving too fast. And as predictable as this title card is, Squidward ends up going back to boating school with SpongeBob. And SpongeBob's nerve-wracking breathing is just... Whew, I'm so glad this show's not in this era no more, because whoa, it was bad. Anyways, back to the episode. So, yeah, the rest of this episode is just SpongeBob torturing Squidward. And yeah, it's pretty filler too. And there's this stupid running gag in this episode that's not even funny, where Squidward goes to use the bathroom, and then he ends up getting beaten up, and then coming back to class with... In what way did the writers think this episode was funny? How did they think it would work? It did not work in any way, shape, or form. And yeah, Mrs. Puff is naive in this episode. Moving on. Number 6 is Demolition Doofus. Oh boy, an episode with suicide jokes, because everyone loves suicide jokes. So basically, it's just another simple plot with SpongeBob trying to get his driver's license and obviously fails. But this one is a special kind of awful. Yes, worse than Boating Buddies. So, yeah, Mrs. Puff ends up getting hurt from this situation and ends up losing all her puffness, which has literally never happened before. Yeah, and then there's the Demolition Derby part, which is where this somewhat of this title card comes in. So Mrs. Puff enters SpongeBob in the Demolition Derby only to get him killed, which doesn't happen in this episode because SpongeBob survives, because obviously this is a kid's show, and if they straight up killed somebody in a kid's show, nobody would watch the show again. But from this episode, why would people still bother watching this show anyway? And you can thank the Sponge Out of Water movie for reviving this series, because when that movie released, the show became good again. But yeah, anyway, Mrs. Puff desperately trying to kill SpongeBob is just and then she tries to kill SpongeBob herself at the end, but then she somehow gets her puff back, which the only thing I said I'd actually liked in this episode is when SpongeBob helped Squidward in the beginning. I'm sorry, I don't think I heard myself right. SpongeBob helping Squidward in the mid-season era. SpongeBob helping Squidward. Never mind, moving on. This episode was terrible. Okay, now we are in the bottom 5 of this list. So yeah, let's get to it. Number 5 is the Splinter. Do you want to see an episode where you see someone getting a splinter and then they end up fully animating SpongeBob getting the splinter? Well, this episode is perfect for you, because I'm pretty sure this episode spent most of their budget on that scene alone. And of course, the giant splinter that SpongeBob gets later on in this episode. I'm pretty sure that's the amount of budget they used just for that single scene and for that splinter. So, and yeah, I also hated Squidward in this episode, which was shocking because Squidward's one of my favorite characters of the show. It's because Squidward was literally taunting SpongeBob, threatening that he was going to tell Mr. Krabs that he got a splinter, which in like 3/4 of the episode, Squidward ends up telling him anyways. Because, of course, the plot wants Mr. Krabs to know. And yeah, Patrick has no right to be in this episode. And yeah, once Patrick tries to help SpongeBob, he ends up making it worse. And then the splinter gets bigger, the thing becomes purple, and then why does the splinter have rabies? You know what? Forget about it. Now we're back to the plot where SpongeBob tries to hide a splinter while he's at work. And then when he enters back into Krusty Krab, Mr. Krab finds out about it because of Squidward. So then when SpongeBob shows him the splinter, literally all Mr. Krabs did was pluck it out. That's literally what we could have done from the start of this episode. SpongeBob getting a splinter, running to Mr. Krabs to get it out. That actually would have been a better way to handle this episode. But the writers would probably think it would be too short and too simple. And of course, too fun for the kids. And don't even get me started when the splinter started oozing. It's seriously disgusting. Confetti comes out and then ooze comes out. One of the worst episodes of this show. Moving on. Number 4 on the list is a pal for Gary. Remember back in Pet Sitter Pat, I said that I was going to get back to a topic where when SpongeBob goes to work, Gary's completely fine? Well, this is the episode I was referring to. So, SpongeBob was worried that Gary is all alone by himself, which I said, Gary is completely fine on his own. So then SpongeBob gets him a pet from this shop like literally in the middle of Bikini Bottom that's literally just there for this episode. And yeah, I get that it was only for this episode, but we could at least get like cameos of it or something, and not just only it being here for this solo episode alone. And so SpongeBob gets a pet named Puffy Fluffy, without listening to the lady's instructions about those things being completely dangerous. So, when SpongeBob brings one home after getting back from work and getting in that stupid thing that he named Puffy Fluffy is actually a beastie monster that literally wants to eat Gary. And this is where the episode completely starts to downfall. So, basically, Puffy Fluffy is threatening to eat Gary, and then SpongeBob puts all the blame on Gary. And now let's get to the scene where Puffy Fluffy turns into beast mode. Puffy Fluffy turns into this eternal monster. And then him and Gary just have this unnecessary fighting scene, which then wakes SpongeBob up. And then when we see the shot of Puffy Fluffy literally about to eat Gary, you won't believe what SpongeBob says. When he walks inside the room where he sees Puffy Fluffy about to eat Gary, SpongeBob thinks that it's Gary's fault when he can clearly see Puffy Fluffy in his monster form. Then Puffy Fluffy puts Gary down and then tries to eat SpongeBob. And then he still somehow thinks that Gary's behind it. So then, after that, Gary chases away Puffy Fluffy and saves SpongeBob from literally almost being killed. And SpongeBob blames Gary for making Puffy Fluffy run away, even though if it weren't for him, SpongeBob would have been dead. And then from now on, or at least for this episode alone, SpongeBob started bringing Gary to work. This episode stresses me out way too much. I hated this episode a whole lot. Number 3 on the list is Smooth Jazz at Bikini Bottom. Don't let the music of this title card fool you. This episode is terrible. So basically, Squidward gets a ticket to see a Kelpie G concert. And then, because of comedy, Patrick eats Squidward's ticket. What is Patrick even doing here? Aren't they getting ready to close? And then anyways, when Squidward and SpongeBob get on the phone, they both end up winning backstage passes to see Kelpie G in person. Now, on paper, this episode actually could have been a really good plot. This episode actually could have been good, except for one minor thing. The pink blobby beast himself. So, when Squidward and SpongeBob finally arrive, there's just some random shenanigans happening, yada yada yada. And then once we finally get to the concert, Patrick literally shows up literally out of nowhere. And then, you won't believe what happens. So then, Patrick eats Squidward's backstage pass. I can't speak right now of how terrible this episode is. And when SpongeBob offered to give Squidward his backstage pass, which is something that SpongeBob normally wouldn't do, when he tries to give it to Squidward, Patrick eats SpongeBob's. And then Patrick just goes up on stage and ends up interrupting the show for what reason? I don't know. And for some stupid reason, the audience loved it. So then, after that, Squidward and SpongeBob try to sneak backstage to see Kelpie G, and they almost end up getting kicked out. But then Kelpie G wanted them to see he wanted to see their music performance, and he ended up liking SpongeBob's ukulele playing, and so he offers him to be on stage with him, leaving Squidward completely crushed. And like I said, on paper, this episode actually could have been a really good plot if it weren't for the unnecessary Squidward torture and Patrick. Moving on. Number 2 on the list is One Course Meal. Now, I know what you guys are thinking. How can an episode be worse than One Course Meal? We'll get to that episode very shortly. But for now, let's talk about One Course Meal. So basically, for the sake of this episode, when Pearl comes in literally in the middle of a fight between Plankton and Krabs, Plankton completely freaks out because he's terrified of her. SpongeBob writers, you know that Plankton met Pearl before. They literally met in The Algae's Always Greener from season 3. When Plankton swapped places with Krabs to see what it would be like if he was Mr. Krabs. Yeah, and like I said, Plankton's met Pearl before, so I don't know why they made him scared of her for this episode. And then Mr. Krabs decided to use his fear against him. And then, yeah, Plankton telling the story of his ancestors being eaten, even though they were literally never eaten, because we see them in 2 episodes. For example, Plankton's army and Something Narwhal comes this way. Plankton's army is from the pre-movie era, like the classic era, and Something Narwhal's from this way is from the modern era of SpongeBob. But well, no, it's probably my first time saying this, but this show has horrible continuity. well, Family Guy's is worse, but still, this isn't about Family Guy. This is about SpongeBob. And so, as you can guess, Mr. Krabs ends up completely scaring the living daylight out of Plankton by dressing up as Pearl. And then this is the part where the episode really starts to get bad. Plankton lays on the street so he could commit suicide, so he could get ran over by a bus. And then when SpongeBob comes, Plankton asks SpongeBob if he could step on him, which I'm not sure if most of you people pay attention, but when people step on Plankton, he just gets squished because this is a kid's show. And you won't believe Mr. Krabs' reaction to when SpongeBob tells him that Plankton tries to commit suicide. He literally laughs. Does Mr. Krabs not know that he's committing murder? Does he not know he could be going to jail for that? But then, SpongeBob knows that it's going too far, so SpongeBob wants Plankton to get back at Mr. Krabs by saying that Mr. Krabs' fear is clowns. And yeah. And then he also tells him that Mr. Krabs was dressed up as Pearl. And so Plankton gets revenge. And the ending is so stupid. Mr. Krabs wins in the end. Mr. Krabs was pretty much the main villain in this episode. He does not deserve a happy ending. Let's just get to the honorable mentions. Now, before I say my honorable mentions, I'm just going to say that there's a lot of them, so I'm just going to be only saying a couple of them I know. So yeah, let's get on to the honorable mentions. The Card, No Nose Nose, Squid's Visit, Pester Pests, Slide Whistle Stooges, To Love a Patty, A Day Without Tears, Yours, Mine, and Mine, Summer Job, Face Freeze, Bubble Buddy Returns, and many more. I said many more because, like I said, I don't remember the other honorable mentions I had. But if I do, maybe I'll put them in the description. So, yeah, let's just get to number 1 on this list and be done with this video already. And the number 1 worst SpongeBob episode, in my opinion, is Choir Boys. This episode is just so painful to watch. And yes, this is a Squidward torture porn. It's just Squidward and SpongeBob stupid singing. SpongeBob trying to hold Squidward back so he can show him his singing abilities. And yeah, the rest of this episode is just filler. Heck, this entire episode is filler. It's just SpongeBob trying to stop Squidward from going to his recital so he can show him his singing. This episode is just... Who thought of this? Who thought the script was okay? Who thought this episode would come out okay? Because if they thought it would be okay, they're completely wrong. I dislike SpongeBob so freaking much in this episode. And surprisingly, I also hate Squidward here. I know this is a Squidward torture episode and we're supposed to feel bad for Squidward, but in this Squidward torture episode, I don't. It's just a stupid, painful, agonizing filler singing that makes me hate him. Not only that, but the way he treats SpongeBob. I know he's holding him up on being late to his choir thing, but still, he literally ropes him up. But then again, SpongeBob literally kept him hostage thanks to a few jellyfishes. And the ending is so stupid. It's just SpongeBob singing this beautiful melody that can make him float. And then when Squidward finally gets there, we just hear this filler whatever. And when SpongeBob arrives, everyone loves his singing. And then they end up making him become the main... Yeah, and that's basically it. SpongeBob steals Squidward's spotlight. Again. Why? I don't like this episode. I don't like it one bit. I don't like this episode. It's filler. It's stupid. It's cringy. It's annoying. It's a SpongeBob episode. Like like I said, thank God this show is not in this era no more because it got real old, real fast. Anyways, guys, that is my top 10 worst SpongeBob episodes. So yeah, if this video turns successful, maybe I'll do a top 10 best SpongeBob episodes. So yeah, please make sure to like and subscribe if you want me to do a top 10 best SpongeBob episodes list. And I'll definitely be trying to work on it. But yeah, as for now, thanks for watching and see y'all next time.